I'm Blair Best. Welcome to The Story. It's good to be back. Tonight, we're checking in on the tariffs' impacts on each of Oregon's 36 counties and a Washington town on the Canadian border. Plus, time is running out for nearly 150 homeless people in the Deschutes National Forest near Bend. They've been told they need to pack up and get out. But first, another eye-opening Multnomah County work session, this time on homeless outreach, as the city and the county face massive budget cuts. It's our big story tonight.
The health visitor is really great. Like, they actually care about people and care about the community, and they've been in the spot that we've been in before. So
today, street outreach was in the spotlight during a Multnomah County board meeting. Commissioners looked at outreach services that the county funds with taxpayer dollars to check on how that outreach is going and where there needs to be improvement and more accountability. The meeting came at the request of Commissioner Shannon Singleton.
This work session was requested so that we can really understand our outreach services, whether it's navigation, inReach, and you'll learn that these are all different across both city investments and county investments, again, in light of both jurisdictions being in a scenario of budget reductions.
Okay, so everyone is really feeling the pressure of the budget cuts that will soon be coming to these county programs. And that pressure is really setting the tone for these types of meetings. Now, the data at the center of today's briefing revealed there are a lot of groups doing street outreach, but a lack of consistency on how that work is measured and a lack of coordination between those groups, which hinders the county commission's ability to make critical decisions.
To me, we're missing data and then sort of this systemic approach of like what is a successful outcome and how do we track that?
This has been a patchwork over time. There was outreach that was happening. It was like one agency, and then there was a need for mental health outreach. And so then that got developed. And so it's just been kind of funding and filling gaps over time. So it isn't quite a system yet.
Outreach has been something I think that we've all been interested in, definitely on my board, my time on the board, getting to understand what is happening and how we can be more effective and efficient.
Today, commissioners heard from several groups that offer outreach and housing services. Most use county money to do so. We're going to focus on the Homeless Services Department and the Behavioral Health Division, which targets people who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. And commissioners also heard from the city of Portland on their outreach work as well. But let's start with the county's Homeless Services Department. That's the group that distributes local, state, and federal dollars to nonprofits that then try to address the crisis on our streets. The county contracts a total of more than $9 million for that department's outreach services. There are 12 separate service providers who receive between $420,000 to nearly $2 million out of that $9 million. Now, as you can see here in this chart, the county isn't naming which groups are getting this money. They simply just say program 1, 2, 3, etc. But if you look closely, some programs, like that program number 5 that we just highlighted for you, gets the most amount of money meant for outreach, $1.7 million, with 7 employees and a goal of getting 120 people placed into housing. Here's Deputy Director for the Homeless Services Department.
We've recognized recently that we need to kind of get our arms back around what outreach is and what we want it to do in the community. So we're in the process of doing sort of an evaluation of Homeless Services Department outreach and how we might be able to better coordinate that in the community and make sure it's better aligned with the resources to get folks into housing.
Now, another outreach group the county helps fund is the Behavioral Health Resource Center. That's this building in downtown between Southwest Oak and Harvey Milk Street. It's a drop-in day center for homeless people struggling with mental health issues or addiction. It also has temporary housing. And it's where I met the man named Alan today. He was there getting help.
yeah, 3 years ago I was the very first person to ever step foot in here as a participant and receive services. They help you get ID document ready if you ain't got your documents, and then they move you to the 4th floor and get you into an apartment or get you into some kind of housing.
So the program that helps people like Alan costs nearly $6 million. Multnomah County pays for about $1.4 million of that. Now, from July to December of last year, staff there has encountered more than 1,200 people and referred 851 to housing. Alan says he was one of them. However, today he was back on the streets.
but they've helped me get into tiny homes. They've helped me get into really good shelters instead of being on the streets and being unsafe.
I would really encourage, as we sort of walk through this conversation, that we have rigor around the word referral. A referral can't be like the end answer. It's like, because I think that will prevent us from knowing whether those referrals are successful.
I do think we have work to do to support the health department in capturing any sort of housing placement outcomes. And again, whether that is a treatment or moving in with families and friends, those positive outcomes, if you look at the data, is something that isn't there, at least in what we're currently capturing.
All right, now let's talk about the city of Portland and the outreach efforts there. The city has what's called the Street Services Coordination Center. That's the group that leads camp removals and helps get people into shelter. It's often those tiny home villages that the county helps pay for. The city program's annual budget is $1.3 million. Now, the latest data shows that in the first week of April, 55 people expressed interest in shelter. 31 accepted a referral, and 18 people stayed in a bed for at least one night. Now let's remember, there are nearly 15,000 homeless people in Multnomah County, and the city has just 5 designated outreach workers. Here's Skylar Brocker-Knapp representing the city of Portland today.
And the Street Services Coordination Center was developed to really focus on those high impact campers, folks who really were not being addressed by any other kind of mechanism within the system. So really wrap our arms around all of the aspects of outreach, housing placement, and resource connection for those folks that we were really seeing time and time again.
There's also a group that's part of Portland Fire and Rescue called the Community Health Assess and Treat Team, also known as CHAT. I went on a ride along with them last year, and here's footage from that day. They have a team that responds to overdoses in the downtown core and teams that respond to low acuity medical calls. They also follow up with patients the next day. The goal is to free up firefighters and space in ambulances and emergency rooms. I caught up with Rick Graves today, the spokesperson for Portland Fire.
It is an incredibly beneficial program to our community. It has diverted many people away from the emergency rooms. It's worked with people on getting them in treatment. It is rehoused individuals. It is the broad footprint that they have in our community is significant. It may not be deep because our funding is not necessarily as great as we would like it to be.
CHAT's budget for this fiscal year was just over $4 million, and they've diverted an average of 30% of patients from going to the emergency room and 15% of patients from riding in an ambulance. According to the county, CHAT saved the hospitals and ambulances about $10 million. But get this, these stats are actually lower than when the program first started in 2021.
Those numbers are a little lower than I'm used to seeing. You know, when the program was established 4 years ago, we were diverting upwards of 75% of the potential patients away from the ED, critically at a critical time, right? That was when AMR was really having difficulties and the community was forced in this level 0 situation. So any ED diversion, any open ambulance was a certain win.
So why are we seeing 30% diversion rate when you said when it kind of started it was much higher?
You know, I'm unable to land on a definitive reason. Any diversion is good. Maybe the early diversions were simply easier cases. Maybe now we've got to the point where we're in society where people are on the edge and maybe they do need a higher level of medical care. Maybe we're catching them, you know, later in the period of I am struggling to thrive. I don't know the reasons for that. It'd be awesome if we had CHAT in service 24/7 with 10 crews across the community at all times. And maybe they would do such a good job they would actually eliminate their need, right? They would be able to get at all these folks that just have lost connection with how to take care of themselves given the system that we live within.
So those were just some of the outreach groups highlighted during today's meeting. But the County Commission wants to make changes to how much of this work is tracked. So starting this next fiscal year, which begins in July, outreach groups funded by the county's Homeless Services Department will be reporting weekly on where they're doing outreach, how many people are on staff, and the number of homeless people they've connected with. The county will also hold listening sessions with providers to create an outreach manual, which will include a set of policies that all providers will be asked to follow.
Life hits you hard sometimes, so you're not ready for it, and you end up out here.
A Thursday deadline is looming for nearly 150 homeless people staying in the Deschutes National Forest. They're being forced to leave the public land just south of Bend on May 1st. That's so the Forest Service can clean up and reduce the risk of wildfire. Now, homeless advocates asked a federal judge to step in and delay the deadline to leave. They argue the Forest Service didn't consider homeless people when evaluating the impact of the closure. The government says it gave plenty of notice, announcing the closure in January, handing out flyers, warning of the deadline. This afternoon, a judge rejected the request, allowing the project to move forward as scheduled. So the area will be completely off limits to all day use activities like hiking and biking. And there will also be no overnight camping. The Forest Service warned the area will be patrolled and officers can issue citations, including fines up to $5,000 and up to 6 months in jail. But those living in the camps feel they're being treated unfairly.
Well, us have been here for a while. We're established and we don't have another place to go. I wish that they'd be a little bit lenient and give us some more time at least, you know.
Some plan to leave before the deadline, but others don't have the same option. They say their vehicles are broken down and nearby shelter beds are full. Now, Kyle Aboshi joins me now after traveling to that area to talk with people there. Kyle, tell us, what was your takeaway?
Well, the biggest thing is this is not just a Portland issue. We often think of homelessness as like a Portland metro issue, but it really is something that affects folks all over the state of Oregon. Cities and towns are struggling with how to deal with this. The dynamics are a little different in that you've got people camping on U.S. forest land. That's unusual. But also we see a lot of the same type of issues coming up, affordable housing being a common one. Housing is really expensive in Central Oregon, Bend specifically, and many of those out in the forest say that's what led them to where they are today.
That makes sense. So what happens if people refuse to leave? Will they be forced out?
That's a good question. I asked the Forest Service that specific question. Will people be arrested? Will they be forcibly removed from the forest? Didn't get a real clear answer. Essentially, a forest spokesperson said, we hope they voluntarily leave. If they don't, they did say there is the threat of arrest, possible fine, maybe even jail time. But at this point, they haven't been real clear about how they're going to be removing people if it comes to that.
So where will these people go? I mean, what are they telling you?
Good question. A lot of them just don't know. And you've covered this enough, you know. It's not easy to move. I mean, even in the best of circumstances, but here they've got cars, campers, RVs that maybe haven't run in years or can't move. And so getting all that stuff out of there is difficult enough. Some people said they're looking to go in other places in the woods near Bend, maybe camp in a similar forest setting. But again, as you well know, the challenge here is that people just move from one spot to the other, and it doesn't really solve the problem.
Correct.
And that's what we're probably going to see here.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks so much, Kyle. And if you would like to see Kyle's full story, you can find it on our TV app, KGW Plus, which you can download for free right now. It's on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. And the segment will also be posted to the KGW YouTube channel. Well, coming up on the story, 100 days into his second term, how are President Trump's shifting policies affecting Oregonians? The Portland Business Journal went county by county, from Astoria to Baker City and the Dalles to Klamath Falls, to find out the common theme they heard about in their 36 profiles. That's when the story returns. And today marks the 100th day of President Donald Trump's second term in office. The milestone has become a sort of natural check-in point for presidents and the public to measure how the term is going so far. Now, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, the word bumpy feels like a fair description. Many may use stronger words for either praise or disgust, so we'll just stick with bumpy. And that term also helps illustrate one of the major headlines of these first 100 days. Tariffs. Measuring the impact of the administration's tariff strategy varies widely. Evan Watson showed you a few examples last night, but our friends at the Portland Business Journal took it a step further, and we think their coverage is worth your time. All right, here it is. Leaders in 36 counties on the economic impact of shifting federal policies. The Business Journal got in touch with business owners, elected and nonprofit leaders, and federal workers in each of the state's 36 counties, writing up a little profile on one person from each county. The goal was to try and understand the impacts to Oregonians all across the state, thanks to policy being shaped and then reshaped in Washington, D.C. Now, we wanted to know how the Business Journal chose each person from each Oregon county.
We had to do some digging and kind of some research into what are the biggest industries in different parts of the state, and really put feelers out to find people who who have businesses that are affected, or organizations, nonprofits, who are personally affected. Maybe they lost their job, or they lost a grant, or maybe their business exports or imports, and they're going to be impacted in some way by the changing tariff policies.
You'll see profiles from ranchers, wine distributors, and organizations that deal with all kinds of industries that make Oregon unique. Elizabeth Hayes, who you just heard from, focused on healthcare, especially in rural areas.
I spoke to a hospital administrator out in Grand Ronde, and Medicaid is looking at $800 billion in cuts. So that will definitely affect them and all rural hospitals. And then we have other people out in rural counties who had FEMA grants that were awarded just last year, and they were in the planning process, and now suddenly those grants have gone away.
Now, as many of you know, priorities and politics differ quite a bit from one side of Oregon to the other. But we asked Elizabeth for a theme reporters heard across the state, and it's something we've heard quite a few times in the last 100 days.
The theme, I would have to say, is sort of confusion. A lot of people don't really understand what's happening at this point, and things are changing on a daily basis. It makes it very uncertain, very hard to plan, very hard to budget, and a lot of people don't know if they are going to have to swallow some extra costs. Can they pass them along to customers? A lot of people who have lost their jobs or lost their grants are angry and confused. They don't know why. They had dedicated their careers to public service and had received glowing reviews, and then suddenly they're out of a job.
Now, if you want to read the entire article, and you should, it's up right now on the Portland Business Journal website. That's bizjournals.com/Portland. Now, on the tariff front, a few Americans have been impacted as much as those who rely on Canadians for business. And that includes hundreds of people living in a 5-square-mile swath of land along the Washington-Canada border. Eric Wilkinson shows us how people there feel their businesses are on the border of collapse.
Beth Calder enveloped her life into her postal shipping business, point-to-point parcel, for more than 24 years.
I kind of do it in my sleep, it seems like.
Now, as she prepares her final packages for delivery, reality is sinking in.
Last Saturday, my niece and I, when we were closing up, we gave each other a big hug. And then I sat out back in my car for about 10 minutes crying. That's garbage.
Beth's is one of countless American businesses caught in the crossfire of a trade war between the United States and Canada. She says since Donald Trump started targeting our allies to the north, her business dropped off 75%.
During COVID, people couldn't come across the border. whereas now they're choosing not to come across the border, and that's a huge difference.
That difference is now forcing Beth to permanently close a business she spent half of her life building, a place she lives just a 2-minute walk from.
So I will be passing by this building for years to come. So it'll still kind of give a little wrench in my gut, I'm sure.
Point Roberts is a tiny town of barely 1,000 people located at the northwesternmost tip of Whatcom County. You have to cross the Canadian border and back through the American border to get there.
We're in real trouble financially.
Brian Calder is a lifelong resident and former president of the Point Roberts Chamber of Commerce.
Trying to get the Canadians back and have them not listen to Trump.
He says he's never seen the economy so bad here.
And getting worse. It's never been this unsettled.
90% of the Point Roberts economy depends on Canadians. Businesses count on the spring and summer tourist seasons to get them through the long, sparse winters. Calder says Point Roberts never fully recovered from COVID. And while the pandemic was a natural disaster, the trade war could end up being a calamity that is entirely man-made.
We're going to have an economic winter all year long, and that means we're wiped out financially.
In the first 3 months of the Trump administration, 20,000 fewer Canadians crossed into Point Roberts than the year before. Canadian customers making their voices heard while American businesses try to hang on.
Hello. One paper bag, please.
The Point Roberts International Marketplace is where British Columbians come for American milk, meat, cheese, and wine. Canadians did all they could to support the store during COVID. Now, the rhetoric coming from D.C. seems to have turned them.
During COVID, I got lots of really supportive emails and people sending me cards and checks, $20. Hey, hang in there. And with this, we get hate mail.
Allie Hayton has owned the market for 27 years. Now she wonders if she'll see 28. She's offering better exchange rates to entice Canadian shoppers, but fears some relationships may be beyond repair.
So without that traffic, I would hate to say die. There's a lot of people here depending on us being here, but things would definitely have to look different.
Back at Point to Point Parcel, they load up the truck for one last trip to the dump. Beth Calder, who leans more conservative than liberal, hopes businesses can be salvaged.
If there's a great big game plan that is going to make our country stronger in the long run, please share it with us, because I don't see it.
We're hearing from Mercy Corps today about the massive loss of federal support that has crippled a lot of its humanitarian work around the world. For nearly 5 decades, the Portland-based organization has been delivering assistance to people in crisis due to conflict, natural disaster, and other forces. But the Trump administration's sweeping cuts include terminating 40 of roughly 60 U.S.-funded Mercy Corps programs.
So it's a devastating number of people that won't be served by these programs. We've calculated it's something like 3.5 million people around the world in countries where we're working. And these aren't just any countries. These are countries that are being faced with extraordinary situations.
Mercy Corps is not going away. Instead, it's lobbying Congress and looking for additional support through things like fundraising. Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. If you ever miss an episode of The Story at 6:30, we re-air it at 8:30 and 10:30 p.m. on our TV app, KGW+. It'll also be there the next day at 11:30 a.m., and you can download that free KGW+ app right now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. In the meantime, have a great Tuesday night, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.